Remembered the smallest details I shared, and talked about a future that felt so real I started believing life was giving me a second chance. I was 59 when someone came into my life saying exactly what a lonely woman longs to hear. He knew when I was sad. What makes me angry now is knowing that while I was smiling at those messages, someone on the other side knew exactly what they were doing to me. For months, I gave him something money could never buy, my trust. Whenever something felt off, there was always the perfect explanation. Whenever doubt started creeping in, a photo, a sweet message, or another promise would appear and make me believe all over again. I couldn't see it then, but now it makes my blood boil to think that every emotion I had may have been watched, studied, and used against me. Then came the day everything changed. I was so convinced I was finally about to live the future I had been promised that I did something I never thought I was capable of doing. But there was a truth hiding behind that story. A truth so cruel that when I began to understand what was really happening, my entire body went cold. Because in that moment, the question was no longer, does he love me? It became, who have I really been talking to this whole time?
The arrivals board flickers. 1440, landed. Sharon Brooks stands at Gate C, Istanbul Airport, gripping a small bouquet of white roses that are already beginning to wilt in the heat trapped inside the terminal. She has rehearsed this moment for 8 months. She knows exactly what she will say when she sees him. She has imagined his face 1,000 times, though she has never once seen it move, only smiled, frozen in photographs. Passengers stream past her. Businessmen with rolling suitcases, a young couple embracing, a grandmother crying with joy as a little girl runs into her arms. Sharon watches every single face, searching. He is not there. She checks her phone. No new messages. The last one, sent 6 hours ago, said simply, "Boarding now, my love. Soon we begin our life." She waits. 30 minutes, an hour. Her phone buzzes. Not him, her bank. A one-time verification code, unrequested. Her stomach tightens. She had used the airport's public Wi-Fi 20 minutes earlier just to check her account balance, just to make sure everything was ready for the new life she believed was about to start. She opens her banking app with trembling fingers. $212,000. Gone. Every cent of the retirement she spent 31 years building, teaching second grade in a small town outside Sacramento, saving $5, $10, $20 a week when she could, skipping vacations, driving the same car for over a decade, vanished in the time it took her to wait for a man who was never going to walk through that gate. She sits down on the cold airport floor, roses still in her hand, and for the first time in 8 months, she lets herself wonder if any of it was real. But to understand how a 59-year-old retired teacher ended up alone in a foreign airport, holding flowers for a stranger who stole her entire life savings, we have to go back. 8 months before, to a Tuesday night, in an empty house, when Sharon Brooks was simply looking for someone to talk to. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and leave a comment letting us know which country you're watching from. Sharon's house had 4 bedrooms, and most nights only one occupied. Her husband, Daniel, had passed away 6 years earlier, a heart attack on an ordinary Thursday. No warning, no goodbye. Her 2 children had grown, married, moved states away. Her son called every Sunday at 7. Her daughter sent photos of the grandchildren she'd only met twice in person. She had retired the year before, after 3 decades of teaching 7-year-olds how to read. She loved the work. She missed it more than she expected. Retirement, she discovered, was not rest. It was silence, a silence that filled every room of a house built for a family of 4, and now holding only her. She filled her days with gardening, with her book club on Wednesdays, with long walks around the reservoir near her home. But the evenings were the hardest. The hours between 6 and 10, when the light faded and the house grew quiet, and there was no one to tell about her day. Her daughter had suggested, half joking, that she try an online community for retirees, a Facebook group for people who loved gardening, travel, and classic films. Sharon joined reluctantly. She wasn't looking for anything. She told herself that, repeatedly, in the weeks that followed. She wasn't lonely. She was simply adjusting. She was 59 years old, and she had never in her life imagined she would fall for a stranger on the internet. She had no idea a message was about to arrive that would change absolutely everything. His name, according to his profile, was Klaus Richter, 58 years old, a structural engineer originally from Hamburg, currently overseeing a bridge construction project. The location changed depending on which part of the story he was telling, somewhere in Southeast Asia. His photos showed a distinguished man with silver hair, kind eyes, standing in front of blueprints, standing on job sites in a hard hat, standing beside a river with a golden retriever that, he explained, had passed away the year before. He commented on one of Sharon's posts about her rose garden. Something thoughtful, something specific. He asked about a particular variety, mentioned his own late wife had grown the same kind in their garden in Germany, years ago before she died of cancer. Sharon almost didn't respond. But there was something in the message. A gentleness, a vulnerability she recognized because she carried the same kind herself. She replied. Within a week, they were messaging every day. Within 2 weeks, several times a day. Klaus asked about her students, her late husband, her children, her fears. He remembered every detail. He asked follow-up questions days later, showing he'd truly listened. He sent her poetry. Rilke, he said, his favorite. He told her about his late wife with a tenderness that made Sharon cry at her kitchen table. He never rushed her. He never pressured her. For 6 weeks, he asked for nothing but conversation. I have been alone for 4 years, he wrote one night. I did not think I would speak to someone the way I speak to you again. I am careful with my heart, Sharon. But you make it difficult to be careful. She read that message 11 times before falling asleep. He was patient. He was intelligent, quoting engineering projects, European politics, philosophy. He was funny in a dry, understated way that made her laugh out loud in her empty kitchen. He asked to video call once early on, but his internet, he said, was unreliable on the job site. He sent voice messages instead, a low, accented voice that Sharon began to recognize instantly, that she began to crave hearing each evening. By the 2nd month, she was in love. She would have told you, if you'd asked her, that it was foolish, that she was too old, too smart, too experienced to fall for someone she'd never met. She would have told you that, and she would have been wrong to believe it made her immune. She had no idea that 3 small, strange details were about to appear. Details that, looking back, were the very first cracks in a story built entirely of lies. The first crack came in week 9. Klaus mentioned he was flying home to Germany for a family matter. His sister, he said, was ill. Sharon asked, naturally, if they could finally video call once he had better internet at home. He agreed enthusiastically. They set a time. The call never happened. His laptop camera had broken, he explained, apologetic, embarrassed. He sent 3 photos instead, taken that same day supposedly, standing outside what he said was a Hamburg hospital. Sharon noticed nothing wrong. Why would she? She had no reason to distrust a man who had shown her nothing but warmth for 2 months. The second crack came a few weeks later. He mentioned, in passing, a work trip to Ankara, Turkey. His company, he said, was bidding on a bridge contract there. 2 days later, he mentioned the same project, but called it a contract in Istanbul. Sharon didn't catch the inconsistency. She wasn't tracking his story that closely. She was living inside the emotion of it, not auditing its facts. The third crack was smaller still. His accent, in the voice messages, occasionally shifted, softer at times, sharper at others, vowels that didn't always sound German. Sharon noticed it once, briefly, and dismissed it instantly. He'd explained he'd lived in several countries for work. Of course his accent shifted. It made sense. Everything he told her made sense, because she wanted it to. Each excuse was small. Each excuse was plausible. And that was precisely the design. She had no idea that every single inconsistency was not an accident. It was a calculated test, run by people who had done this hundreds of times before, checking exactly how much she was willing to overlook for love. By month 4, Sharon had told her book club about him. She had told her sister. She had not yet told her children. Some instinct held her back, though she couldn't say why. Klaus began to speak about the future. Not vaguely, specifically. He wanted to retire from the bridge project within the year. He wanted to move to the United States, to be near her. He described, in detail, the small house he pictured them buying together, with a garden large enough for her roses. He asked about her favorite parts of California. Said he wanted to see them all with her. Sharon began, quietly, to imagine it. She researched flights to wherever his next assignment would take him, thinking she might visit. She looked at reception venues near her home. Nothing serious, she told herself, just looking. She mentioned to her sister, laughing nervously, that she might finally wear white again one day. She had, without fully realizing it, begun investing not just her heart, but her future. Then, in the 5th month, Klaus told her about the wedding he pictured. Small, intimate, in her garden, surrounded by roses. He said he had already begun planning his move. He said his company was finally sending him to complete his final major project before retirement. A bridge outside Istanbul. Once it was finished, he told her, he would fly directly to California. To her. Sharon cried when she read that message. She believed, completely, that her loneliness was finally ending. She had no idea that the moment she began planning a future with him was the exact moment the quadrilla, the organized group behind Klaus Richter, considered her ready. It began small, the way it always does. Klaus explained that his equipment had been delayed at customs in Istanbul, a shipment of specialized surveying tools required for the bridge project. The customs fee, he said, was a formality, but his company's finance department was processing a transfer that would take several business days. Could she help, just temporarily, with $800? He would repay her the moment the company's transfer cleared. Sharon hesitated for exactly 1 day. Then she sent it. He thanked her with what seemed like genuine embarrassment. He apologized repeatedly. He promised to repay her within the week, plus interest, he joked, for her trouble. 3 days later, he did send something back, a screenshot of a wire transfer confirmation, $800, apparently sent from a German bank. It never arrived in Sharon's account. When she mentioned this, gently, Klaus expressed shock, frustration, embarrassment. International transfers, he explained, sometimes took 2 to 3 weeks to clear through intermediary banks. He apologized again. He seemed more upset about the delay than she was. She believed him completely. She had no idea that this first $800 was never a mistake, a delay, or a misunderstanding. It was a test, a small, deliberate test to measure exactly how far her trust would stretch and exactly how much more she could be asked to give. 2 weeks after the first payment, disaster struck again. Klaus's company laptop was stolen from his site office, along with equipment worth thousands of dollars. He was, he said, personally liable for a portion of the replacement cost until insurance processed the claim. This time, the number was larger, $3,400. Sharon sent it. Then, as if the universe wanted to reward her faith, something wonderful happened. Klaus sent her a selfie, the first new photo in weeks, standing in front of a partially constructed bridge, hard hat under his arm, smiling directly at the camera. "This is what we are building," he wrote. "Soon, I build something with you instead." Sharon saved that photo. She looked at it every night before bed. A week later, another gift, a photo of a plane ticket, dated for a flight in 3 months, Istanbul to Los Angeles. "I am counting the days," he wrote. Every time doubt crept toward Sharon's mind, a piece of hope arrived just in time to push it back out. A photo, a voice message, a promise. It was never enough proof to be certain, but always just enough to keep believing. She had no idea that this rhythm, crisis, payment, hope, relief, was not coincidence. It was a formula, refined over years, designed specifically to keep a victim's hope one step ahead of her doubt, forever. Over the following 4 months, the crises grew larger, and so did the money. A supposed legal dispute over land rights near the bridge site, $6,000. A medical emergency, his teenage nephew, hospitalized after a car accident in Hamburg, and Klaus, he said, was the only family member with savings available, $9,200. A bribe, he admitted with what appeared to be deep shame, required to release his passport from a corrupt local official after a supposed visa complication, $14,500. Each story was more elaborate than the last. Each lie required Klaus to perform greater emotion, desperation, humiliation, gratitude. And each time, Sharon paid, because by now she had paid so much that stopping felt like admitting the earlier payments meant nothing. She began withdrawing from her retirement accounts. She told the bank it was for a home renovation. She told her sister it was for a private matter, and asked her gently not to bring it up with the rest of the family. She told herself each time that this would be the last one. She had no idea that psychologists have a name for exactly what was happening inside her, the sunk cost trap, the same mechanism that keeps a gambler at the table after every loss, whispering that the only way out is to keep going in. Then came the phone call that Sharon would replay in her memory for years afterward. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when her phone rang. Not a text, not a voice message, an actual call, the first real-time contact in 8 months. Klaus's voice, breathless, urgent, told her the bridge project was finished. He was cleared to leave. His flight to meet her would depart from Istanbul in 6 days. But there was a wire freeze, he explained. A final financial audit required by his company before releasing his last paycheck, and his personal savings, funds he needed to relocate permanently. Until it cleared, he had nothing. Could she cover his flight, and enough to start their life together once he landed? $22,000. It was, by far, the largest request yet. Sharon sat in the dark of her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, and for the first time in 8 months, she felt something cold move through her chest. Not doubt about him, doubt about herself, about whether she had lost her mind. But his voice, that same low, warm voice she had fallen for, steadied her. He told her he loved her. He told her this was the last thing he would ever ask of her. He told her that in 6 days, none of this would matter, because they would finally be together. She transferred the money the next morning. She had no idea that this call, his voice, his urgency, his declaration of love, was the final act of the setup, the last performance before the closing scene. Because in 6 days, she would be standing at an airport gate, and he would never come. The story does not end on that airport floor. It only truly begins there. In the days following Sharon's discovery that her account had been emptied, she did what she should have done 8 months earlier. She searched, not for love this time, but for facts. She uploaded Klaus's profile photos to a reverse image search. The first result loaded in seconds. The man in the photos was not Klaus Richter. He was a Brazilian firefighter, a real person with a public Instagram account, who had no idea his face had been stolen and used to build a fake identity thousands of miles away. Sharon stared at his real name, his real family photos, his real life, a life that had nothing to do with Bridges or Hamburg or her. That was the first layer. The second layer came 2 weeks later, when Sharon, working with a cybercrime investigator recommended by her bank, discovered that the phone number used to call her that final night had been routed through a voice-over IP service, untraceable to any physical SIM card, rentable by anyone, anywhere in the world, for a few dollars. The third layer came a month after that. The bank account she had wired money to, 5 different accounts across 3 countries, were traced by investigators to a network of mule accounts, opened using stolen identities, cycling money through cryptocurrency exchanges within hours of each deposit. The fourth layer was the hardest. Investigators explained that Klaus was very likely not one person at all, but a role, a script, performed by different members of an organized fraud operation, working in shifts, following a playbook refined over thousands of previous targets. The romantic messages, the poetry, the grief about a late wife, all of it might have been written by one person, while another handled the voice calls, and a third managed the financial logistics. The fifth and final layer came from an international fraud task force report, months later, which linked the case to a larger criminal network operating primarily out of West Africa, running dozens of simultaneous romance scam operations targeting retirees across the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia. An operation, investigators believed, that had extracted well over $10 million from victims just like Sharon over a period of several years. Each layer of truth was worse than the one before it. And with each one, Sharon understood a little more clearly that she had not fallen in love with a person. She had fallen in love with a machine built specifically to make her feel loved. Sharon Brooks lost $212,000, every dollar of her retirement, accumulated across 31 years of teaching. She lost her home, eventually, forced to sell it to cover the debts she had taken on, trying to keep up with Klaus's escalating requests. She moved into a small apartment near her daughter, at 59 years old, starting over in a way she never imagined she would have to. She lost something harder to name, too, a trust in her own judgment that took years to even partially rebuild. For a long time, she told interviewers later, she couldn't understand how a woman who had spent her whole career teaching children to think critically had been unable to see what, in hindsight, seemed so obvious. But experts who studied these crimes told her something that eventually helped her forgive herself. Romance scam operations are not crude or amateurish. They are run like businesses, with scripts, quotas, and training programs. They specifically target people who are not foolish, but generous, people whose capacity for empathy and trust, the very qualities that made Sharon a beloved teacher for 3 decades, were the exact qualities the scammers were trained to exploit. Sharon eventually did something few victims do. She went public. She spoke to local news, then national outlets, then began speaking at community centers and senior groups about what had happened to her, hoping that by telling her story in detail, she might stop even one other person from boarding a similar flight, waiting at a similar gate, for a man who would never come. She still gardens. Her roses, she says, survived even when almost everything else didn't. She has not, as of the last time she spoke publicly about it, tried online dating again. But she has not closed the door on love entirely, only on the version of it that arrives too fast, too perfect, and asks, eventually, for money. "I don't regret loving him," she said once, near the end of an interview, "because for a while, it was the realest thing I'd felt in years. I regret that it was never real for him at all." 10,782 kilometers. That's the distance between Sacramento and Istanbul. That's how far Sharon Brooks traveled for a man who existed only as photographs stolen from a stranger, and a voice rented by the hour. She never met him. She never will. But somewhere, likely still, someone using a different name, different photographs, and the same script is typing a first message to someone else who is simply looking for someone to talk to on a quiet Tuesday night.